Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
All right, so welcome back to the Launch Code. Today we've got a couple. How would we classify you guys? Like, we've got a filmmaker and
I'm the brand director for Sitka Gear and also filmmaker, photographer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm Shannon Vandivier. I'm a film producer and photographer. Yeah.
And what's your company called?
Company is Cold Collaborative.
Cold Collaborative.
ColdCollaborative.com.
Okay.
So I was at ATA last weekend,
Yeah.
Yep.
and
What's ATA, Baker?
Archery Trade Association.
Okay.
So it's like SHOT Show, but for bows. And Sloan Brown from Backbone reached out to me a month ago and said, hey, Aaron Snyder made the introduction. He's like, hey, what do you think of this film we're putting out? So I got a rough cut. And I watched it, and I was like, this is pretty awesome. I said, I'm going to send this to a few people to beta, just get a check off on it. So I sent it to Logan. He watched it. Logan and I had a call with Sloan. I sent the link to, not the link, but I sent the raw file to a bunch of people, and it's one of the best outdoor films I've seen ever. The film we're talking about, everyone listening, is called Place of Peace, and it's about Bobby Farmer, and I'll let these guys get into it. But I was at ATA and at the Yeti booth, and I sat down. Rachel Attila was there.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'm a fan of what you do, and et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, have you seen Place of Peace? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That's my favorite movie. I was like, oh my God. I started just rambling. And she's like, yeah, this is Shannon. Like, he made the film. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, dude, you coming to SHOT Show? He's like, yeah. I was like, you got to meet Evan and Matt and the boys, and I want to get you on the podcast and talk about the film. And it's for me watching it, and it made me think a lot of like my buddies at BRC, and Evan, like a couple weeks before, it asked me about bows and stuff because you had a bow, and and he was like, yeah, I want to start shooting some, and like there's a line in the film, and we'll get into that, but I watched the film, and there's a line he said where it's therapy 20 steps at a time, and I texted Evan Williams at Hoyt, and I said, dude, I want to get 2 bows. So I bought Matt and Evan bows as Christmas presents because of this film.
Rad.
And it's just the thing he's talking about when you're shooting the bow. All you think about is shooting the bow. You don't think about other stuff. It's literally you're focused in that moment on what's going on, and even when you're just shooting a target or whatever. So I was like, man, that'd be really cool. I want to introduce these guys to as much stuff, my hobbies, because they've introduced me and taught me a bunch of stuff about what they do. And so here we are in Vegas at SHOT Show, and wanted to talk about the film and tell everyone about it and all that good stuff and how it came to be, the process.
Yeah, why don't you guys just start with how the film came to be? What's it meant for? What's it all about?
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words, man. It came to be, before I was at Sitka, I was the brand manager for Matthews Archery, and I was driving, and I don't know, probably about a month or two prior, had found Shannon on Instagram, and we kind of just started chatting, and he calls me up, and he's like, man, I got this story, and in marketing, you hear everybody's got an idea and something to pitch you, and you're like, all right, yeah. So I'm like, all right, cool, and I try to, his work was awesome, so I'm like, all right, let's hear it, and he starts telling Bobby's story. At first I'm like, whatever, and he starts going deeper, and I'm like, God, this is heavy, and I wanted to focus. I was worried I was going to lose service. So I remember pulling over in my truck and just sitting on the side of the road and like just listening to this and going, this is incredible, and it's so often in the outdoor space that films are just, they're not really, they're called films because it's just like a sexy word for video, but they're not stories, they're just a guy is going hunting, and this was like a real story. And anyway, it just kind of blew me away. My biggest concern at the time was Shannon had never made a film in his life. And I was like, all right. So my photographer friend who's like, this is like a risky proposition. And anyway, from there,
I had it in the bag, just for the record. I had it.
Yeah, he's like super confident. He's like, dude, trust me. I'm like, how would you say that? I trust you. He's like, no, look at these video clips I recorded on a fishing trip. So anyway, fast forward, I'm at Sitka then, and became the brand director at Sitka, and we started talking, and I wanted to make this film. Like the story mattered, and it was really cool, and I just, Bobby is just, it's like nothing I'd heard before, and so. Yeah, I don't even know. I had just started there, and I called another buddy of mine, JK. He directed the Fourth Phase and then Art of Flight with Travis Rice, snowboard film. It's like
I've heard of that one.
amazing.
yeah, it's like kind of the film that changed action sports. And JK and I had been, working together a little bit in the past, but had never really made a film together. And so anyway, I called up JK. I was like, so my buddies never made a film. He's like, what? And anyway, the three of us just kind of bootstrap the thing. I don't know if you want to pick up on anything, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate. The whole situation just really was driven by a relationship.
Yeah, tell them how you met Bobby.
So Bobby moved next door to me. I was renting a house with my wife while we were hopefully looking, and eventually found the house we live in now. And I moved in, and this guy starts unpacking his trucks a few months later, and I noticed some purple Hart plates on the back of the truck, and this dude that looked pretty homeless, which I have now come to find is, the kind of the SF way. They're formerly known as the Bearded Taliban. But Bobby, he turned into a very quick friend. Started just as driveway buddies. And over the evolution of about 8 months, we became much more than that, a real friendship. But just the dude is genuine, just loyalty, just from top to bottom. So cool dude, shared with me his story. And naturally, as a aspiring filmmaker at the time and a photographer, I had my roots from my father, who was a photojournalist and shot for National Geographic and Life magazine, but more importantly, had always instilled within me, this found desire just to tell stories that mattered. And so I just knew it was special, just hearing his story and hearing what he was doing, what he had gone through, and what he was trying to move towards, which was helping other guys that were in his situation. That was so cool.
And for those people listening, so Bobby Farmer was in third group. Got shot and blown up.
That's right.
And dealt with struggles coming back. And
yes. Yeah.
So
Stuck a gun in his mouth. I mean, he would tell you guys that if he was sitting right here. And he dealt with the hardships of war and was a bad dad through that, and had to fight to regain his family. And there was a real rebirth that came through that, and through what 10 tours will do to a man, for sure. Yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah, what resonated with me, I don't have any military background, and I actually haven't I have had friends serve and stuff, but just don't have a real deep connection to it. Just my life path has not been that. And when I heard this story, like on one hand I can't relate at all, but then on the other hand, he talks about and his pain is significantly worse than anything I've experienced in my life, but have certainly experienced loss and pain, in my own ways. And when I'm thinking back to a specific time in my life that was really gnarly, and when it was, I remember just like retreating into the wilderness and just spending. That's where I would spend my time. I had owned my own company at the time, and it was just gone in the wilderness, and just found that to be the most healing thing. I remember just spend day after day just like sitting on the side of this creek and just letting everything, without my phone, without anything, and just watching the sunrise and feeling so small, and like that feeling good to feel small, because you just realize that, okay, my problems are they just don't feel as big, when you're out there. And so with Bobby's story, like when he's talking about, getting this, this bow, and just the repetition of shooting, in silence by yourself, and just watching the arc of the air and just sending it, and just being in that place, it was like, I remember the piece that I found, and so I felt like this total connection to the guy that on one hand couldn't connect with in any way, just because I've never experienced anything like that.
How long did the project take from start to finish?
Man, we actually shot it. We shot it, really quick. We shot like 3 days. The three of us flew down. Shannon shot most of it. I shot, picked up different shots. We ran around. It was pretty ghetto.
Yeah, well, to answer your question in short, it took us about
days?
8 months to really fully tell the story, because shooting the film was one thing, but
Yeah.
doing justice to the story was a whole another
We shot the whole
beast.
thing though in like 6 days or something.
It was a total of 18 days of shooting.
Yeah, with hunting. Yeah,
With
yeah,
hunting
the
and
part.
everything,
I
yeah.
was in the field with you.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, just this like figuring out the story and the war footage, and like that's the part that like we wanted to. I didn't want to say like Bobby had a hard life. Like, trust me. It was like I wanted to try to communicate like what that felt like. When he's describing like what this feels like, and the shot. The scene opens up. The film, opens up like at a gas station. We don't explain it in the film, but I remember him telling me, he's like in the interview. He's like, I was walking down the street in some country, and he's like, and diesel was just like flowing down the sidewalk, and I walk up and there's this human brain sitting there on the sidewalk, as if it like somebody had like cut it perfectly out of a head, just like like a science project. It was just sitting there with diesel flowing around it, and like my boots walk. And he just remember thinking, like, he said, "What the fuck is a brain doing on the sidewalk?" And he just like was the trippiest thing, because it was so random. And he's like, now every time I smell diesel, I think about this human brain on the sidewalk, and I'm just like, oh geez, and like I wouldn't think of it like that. And so the whole film opens up at this gas station, and he's filling up, his Jeep, and yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about stuff like that, and just trying to understand Bobby's story and trying to tell it through historical footage, and which was a huge.
It's interesting you say that, because like Evan, I've heard you tell stories like you would come back from deployments and go up in the mountains of Idaho and the rivers and stuff like that, and that was kind of like your like resetting point, like you kind of reset.
Yeah, I had a place in Colorado. I still do, and then I still actually have a rafting company in Idaho, and it was just a place that you could reset. Like, there's no cell phones, there's no communication, there's just literally just okay. You can spend a month, 2 months. I came back from my last trip in Afghanistan. I forget what year it was, 13, I think. And I spent 3 months in the most remote wilderness area in the lower 48.
Wow.
But I also knew I was done. I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, so I was ready to kind of cut away, and then ultimately I still stayed in kind of a training department, but I knew that was like, I'm separating one chapter basically. I'm just kind of closing the book on it and moving on to the next one. But it was very, very therapeutic in a lot of different ways, where you just have to kind of disconnect. And like the river is very much like that. I shoot a bow, I shoot a traditional bow, and now I shoot a compound bow. But the river is one of those things where I could sit on a boat and be alone on a boat for 5-6 hours out of the day, with like lunch or whatever in between. And the only thing I had to worry about was like navigating the river, and you have to be 100% present in that. But it's such an epically beautiful environment that it's not like sitting in your living room, It's not like sitting in your living room or laying in bed. Like, you're in this fucking beautiful environment. You're forced to work, because if you don't work, you're gonna, you're gonna crash a fucking boat up against a rock, and you're gonna, flip it. And I was forced to work and concentrate on something else than Afghanistan or Iraq or anything else. I would honestly say is probably I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew exactly what I needed, because I was really mentally I was really unhealthy at that point. Like, And so, I mean, I can absolutely empathize with him to a certain degree. I mean, I was never shot. I was never blown up, so I can't really say that. But I can say that, you know, living in that environment for the majority of my adult life, and understanding, like, my body actually told me that's what I needed, because I was so disconnected from reality. My biggest fear was that I wouldn't be able to have an emotion about anything in any context. So my biggest fear was like getting back into the mountains that I truly loved at one point in my life, but I couldn't find. There was no happiness. There's no emotion. I was completely void of any emotion whatsoever. I'm not trying to hyper dramatize it. It's just like that's the way it was. My body actually told me, like, you probably need to go do something else, or like this is just you're going to be nothing. Like,
is that what you guys wanted the main message to be, as far as obviously telling in a compelling and amazing story, but also kind of how someone found peace in their own mind, and how kind of something so obscure as just shooting a bow can bring, you know, a place of peace?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think the main thing for me in my perception of it all was this. I mean, kind of like you've described there, Evan, is the idea that you become cold. Your adrenal glands, I mean, if you really think about it from a scientific standpoint, you know, like, I mean, how long can a war go on? How long can you live in that state where your adrenal glands are doing what they're doing 24/7 till eventually you're just numb and you're cold? And the interesting part about Bobby's transformation, and the interesting part of what you've just described, is the idea that, you know, there can be a rebirth. You can feel something again. And for Bobby, when he came home, he was scared of the exact same thing, you know. And so telling that story of just this rebirthing process, this transformation, this kind of finding that fragility of life again, when for so long it's become numb to you. Seeing a brain on the pavement is not an everyday thing.
Well,
what are your thoughts there?
I didn't really look at it. I mean, I'm not disagreeing whatsoever.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like I had considered, I think for a long time, I think I just considered myself dead, like basically from, you know, 2003 until, you know, 2013. I just basically considered myself dead. So, you know, it's not only the adrenaline or whatever in any context that you're dealing with, but you just kind of write yourself off, like, I'm dead. So emotionally, you have to kill yourself anyway, because if you don't, you'll be really susceptible to a wide variety of feelings that can affect whether or not you perform or you don't perform, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, there's a lot of things that I can definitely empathize with, and I mean, at that point, I think, you know, even with the first birth of my child, which is in 2000. Oh, fuck. What
14?
No. What year is it? Yeah, it was
18.
in 14. Yeah.
I got you.
Like my one of my big fears, and I talked to my wife about it, was like, I'm just hoping that I can actually have the capacity to love, because it was a huge fear. Like, it was a super huge fear. It was ever present in my life at that point, which was, I have no feeling, like zero feeling, didn't give a fuck about anything. Like, and you can't really live like that, because you're not living, you're dead. And I don't know if I know we've had similar conversations where just like, you know, dudes will fill it with like booze and pussy, you know.
Dude, what are you looking at me when you say that?
You know,
well, everybody
you know.
has a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't resonate with like natural human conditions and emotions, you find yourself very ostracized from, you know, society. And so people find a plethora of ways to cope with it, whether it's booze, alcoholism, drugs, pills, putting a pistol in the mouth. There's always some outlet that's not a good outlet, and so finding one where you can find emotion again, find purpose, and sometimes it's the most obscure things you can find it in. Like in Bobby's case, the bow stuff, which is awesome. I mean, I think business has kind of been that for me, and the creative outlet. I'm sure that you found your own ways of coping with whatever you've gone through in life with the creative process, because it's a way to really put all of your emotion into something, get a final product, and it brings community together.
Yeah, you said when we were recording with Donnie Vincent before this, and I asked you a question, like, what simple pleasures, when you were deployed and stuff, and you said it was always music. Mm-hmm. When you came back, was it also music? Like, you come back from
to this day, yeah, man. Like, I think everybody, and honestly, it takes like you have to think about what are the things that get you happiness a little bit and kind of pull you away to self-evaluate and internalize your own emotions and thoughts to really figure yourself out. And music has been that for me, because it just kind of tones everything out, tones the worlds out, and it's almost like what liquor does to people, right? Because they forget about reality. They can they focus on, it's a very singular method of thinking, because you're drunk. You're thinking about either the pussy or you're thinking about whatever. But there's different ways of finding that. Just like I think bow hunting, the only thing you focus on is, all right, can I let this fucking arrow go and hit center mass? Just how MMA has done that for me as well, where the only thing I'm focused on is not getting my head ripped off by a UFC fighter. I don't think about anything else. I don't think about the drama that I've constructed in my head that isn't really like a real thing. People just create drama, and
I do that a lot.
Interpret to be real.
When you say, was it listening to the music, or was it like, Matt's a pretty accomplished musician. He's a talented guy, singer, writes great music, plays instruments.
I paid him to say that.
He did.
I had guitar, man.
But when you say music, was it when you came back? Was it learning the instruments and kind of perfecting that craft, or was it listening to music, or both? Like,
both.
I've never asked you when you picked a guitar up for the first time. I don't know.
I mean, both. I think music, listening to it for the most part, but then obviously that creative outlet as well. And I think that's film, music as well. I mean, right? Because it's a whole process. I mean, you can't just look at film in a singular method of saying, hey, it's just shooting something. I mean, it's like music and sound is a fourth character in the movie. It always is, right? So I think it's both.
It's really interesting because Bobby's story follows that. There's a group out there, BCR, Boulder Crest Retreat, and that's where Bobby kind of really found his center again. And music was a big one for him. He said when he would smell diesel or something would really produce a trigger with him, and he'd really find himself. I mean, the way he describes it is that he would physically think he was back there. Like, physically, something would trigger him, and all he could smell was diesel. All he could smell was burning flesh. All he could see was smoke. And oddly enough, if he turned on his favorite music or something, it just grounded him. Instantly, he would regain his sense of awareness and a sense of presence that actually would pull him out of that trigger.
I truly believe your body creates a survival mechanism. It's the same thing Evan was talking about, where you've conditioned it so many times and so many iterations of how do I survive in this situation, that there's sensory things that impact your body. So psychologically, you're not saying I'm back in Iraq or whatever. Your body smells that diesel and it's going, holy shit, I need to go in survival mode. I better ping all my senses. I better fucking drop a shit ton of adrenaline because I got to be aware of my surroundings. And then you have to use your brain to control your body and go, okay, I'm not there. How do I convince my body that I'm not there now? And
but there's also, like, I think with triggers and stuff like that, there's a lot of people tend to focus on like the negative with triggers. But I think, like, for me, like, and I smell fresh cut grass, it reminds me of football camp. Yeah. Or I hear songs or
it goes both ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but sure. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people you hear the word trigger.
I smell my dad telling me I have to work.
Yeah, see, I smell football. It makes me think of football, or like certain music or songs or whatever. Like, will take you back to a different time in your place, or like my 5th birthday when I got my favorite birthday present of all time was a pair of Birdwell beach breeches. They're mustard colored. I'll never forget it, dude. I just turned 5. I've never reacted like that to a gift. Like, just little things like that, or certain flowers or stuff remind me of the beach in my childhood. But
yeah, I see what you're saying, ingrained in your psyche. I mean, there's really no controlling it. I mean, unless you go through more iterations of trying to change that. But yeah.
Why are you looking at me like that?
I'm sorry. We were having a really good conversation until he brought up his fucking 5th present, like Birdwell beach britches or some bullshit. Like, Jesus,
suit. I was 5
years
old.
Like a tongue twister.
It was a 5.
The fact that you remember that's quite impressive, actually.
Somebody's
it's
Googling that.
Really good.
Birdwells? I'll do the legit.
Oh,
So
that's
do you guys
totally-
have any other projects in the
Yeah.
works after this one? Because we just had the ability to kind of skim through it, and I would absolutely love to watch that in a more isolated environment. But
we both do. You've got
Yeah.
a fly fishing film.
Yeah, so I've got a film that's actually being it's being released. Its first premiere is happening in Bozeman, Montana, January 27th, which is this coming Saturday, which is a fly fishing film. It's a really cool film about similar redemption style story about a Honduran cocaine smuggling gangster turned fly fishing guide, and it's a really cool redemption story within itself. But it'll tour the F3T fly fishing tour.
does he sell cocaine during the fly fishing, or is that?
I'm not gonna guess what happened in the first few years, but no, he has now been redeemed from having to do that. So
That's great. Is that where you're gonna start focusing like short films?
absolutely, yeah.
okay.
So currently I'm a producer for a TV show on the Outdoor Channel, Hunt Masters, with Greg Ritz, and that TV is a fun game. It's an interesting beast within itself. I actually heard a podcast with you guys about who was it, Osborne?
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, that was a really intriguing podcast, and I can relate with him in a lot of ways. Absolutely. But short films, by far and above, we're in an interesting landscape of telling authentic stories and doing it in really compelling and creative ways. And that's where Sitka, it's been, an honor to get to work with Brad and his creative team, but it's been really cool because brands are now coming in and seeing the value of really telling such authentic and compelling stories.
We have Jonathan Hart on tomorrow morning. He's the founder, one of the founder. Sole founder of Sitka, the only founder. We have him tomorrow morning, and talking about Sitka and stuff. Like, I took interesting for you. I'll share this with you. Logan, who's in the room, you can't see, but I took Logan to Africa 2 years ago, and we were sitting there, and we're sitting in this like a hogan, a sunken blind in the ground, and bow hunting, and I think it was the second day, and I looked over at him and I said, "So what do you think of all this, man?" He goes, "This is really cool." He's like, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot. And he goes, he said, your last appointment in Afghanistan was tough, and and he said this is like really helpful, like being here out in this. There's some similarities, like Bobby says in the film. You're packing your stuff up,
right?
And he's like, there's some similarities. Like, this is really cool experience for me, So that for me, I'm planning on embarrassing you, but that meant the world to me to hear those words come out of his mouth, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. I can tell you what blind we were in, where we were sitting, all that stuff, and it's just and that's how Logan got turned on to Sitka Gear. That was an interesting segue. Emotional story into Sitka Gear.
It was some good camo though.
No, but I'm fired up that you
on
guys are
Google.
getting bows. Like, I think it's going to be awesome. Like, I finished. I did a Boulder River hike last week. Weekend before last, it was like 10 miles, and coming back and get a cell signal, and my phone blows up, and I pull it up, and I look, and Evan's noggin's right there on a video, and he goes, "Okay, Baker, what do you think about this?" And he's like, "I'm working on my zero," and he sends me a video of the target at 27 yards, and he's all in the zone. He's like, "Yeah, I got one flyer here, and what do you think?" And I was like, "Everyone stop this hike. I need to communicate with him about this." I was like, first of all, no one works a zero at 27 yards. Back it out to 10. And he goes, "Is that what I should do?" And I was like, "Yeah, do 10, then do 20. And he texts me back, and he goes, "Nope, I keep hitting the arrows. They're all too close. I'm going to go back I need to be further away." And I was like, "Well, okay, then do what you got to do."
Evan likes to shoot his compound bow with his newborn on his back.
Yeah.
It's super cute.
From his back, from his kitchen.
good.
Well, he
his
gets it
backyard.
back towards the kitchen so that Rowan isn't cold.
Yeah.
Because the heater, and then he's out in the door, so it's babysitting and bow hunting all in
Spent a lot
one.
of time doing that with
Yeah.
the girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been
Oh,
there.
Yeah.
No, and
Yeah,
he's good.
I've been taking them in the field since they were born. I'd kill a deer, near the home or something like that. My wife would come out and bring, my first daughter out, and even while we were pregnant, we've killed animals together with the girls, like, there, and so in a sense, and yeah, we were. I had my daughter on my back, and it was kind of coming out of that period that I told you about. I was down near that creek, where I used to spend a lot of time, and it was her first hunt with me, and I was like, this is going to be ridiculous because I'm going to have a baby. And I was literally had a tag in my pocket, like arrow nocked, and I'm like walking this ridge where I've killed several bucks, in California, and they're kind of right above where they bed, and it can totally work that if you're quiet, they'll stand up out of their bed and you can shoot straight down this hill. And I'm walking along and I'm like, man, my back's like felt like really warm, and I'm like, man, I'm like sweat, and I'm like, oh God. I just and she just started peeing all the way down and like filled my pants. It was like going down my ass, my legs. I pull her off like this old cell phone video and I'm like, what happened? She's like, I peed. She just peed all down the back of me. And that's awesome that you're doing that. It's a good time.
I like, it's funny because it's like I love shooting the bow. Like,
Yeah.
I love it. Like I love shooting my bow more than I love shooting like my pistols or anything else that we have right now.
Millions of rounds through the pistol.
I wouldn't say millions.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah,
Yes.
hundreds of thousands for sure. But it's definitely it's something completely different. It's
different.
Like it's just different, and it's one of those things too where I've got to start over, kind of.
Yeah.
Where I'm like. It's a fucking really cool challenge for me to like just try to place these arrows in the right spot, and I have to keep going through the fundamentals of shooting, and the learning curve in it is so exponential at this point. So
He was talking yesterday. He's like, and he's figuring this out on his own. And anchor point, setting his anchor point consistently and all that stuff, and not putting tension on the string, and like it makes me so freaking happy and so excited just to know it's like, all right, he's shooting a bow. This is gonna be great. Next iteration, they're gonna get him to come hunting with me. That's what I want to do.
Do you hunt right now?
Not with a bow, but I
Have you
am.
done, though?
I'm going to, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have with a rifle for sure.
Okay,
I grew up
that's
in
cool.
northern Idaho, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, just the other day I was like, I'm going to start using this level. That looks like fucking cool on the site. I'm going to use this level.
Oh, the level on your site?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
should totally use that.
Yeah, exactly. I think
difference.
this is here for a reason. I'm going to use this thing.
totally
It
take
seems
advantage
like
of this.
It's weird.
You
Now
know?
I'm hitting things.
Yeah, and but yeah, once I leveled it, like once I just changed a few things, And it's so funny because I'm such a snob. I don't like to watch YouTube videos, even though like I'm a proponent of it. But I don't know who's actually worth a shit to watch.
Yeah.
Like who's this dude? Like who's this dude on YouTube talking about shooting? Does he even know anything about shooting? So I texted a couple guys like Evan. So I texted Evan.
Evan Williams from Hoyt.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I'll just text dudes like who do I watch, or what type of release are you using, asking simple questions, and the fact like, man, I've got to learn so much, but I'm really excited to learn it, right? Where it's like, if you had like the sexiest Glock sitting here on the counter and a compound bow, I'd pick the compound up any day of the week.
Totally. Yeah, it's just different. It's like you said. I love guns. I've grown up, with Red Ryder, then into a Chickmunk 22, and then gone through that whole process and love shooting guns. But it's different. The bow it's just that it's quiet. It's that sending that arc. You feel like you're like sending something because it's when you pull the trigger on a gun, it's like instant. Like you hit your target like the minute you finish pulling that trigger. It's so where a bow, especially at long range, you can really just. I don't know, just something about it.
Yeah, and it's when you're out hunting and you wind up taking your first animal with a bow, like it is so intimate.
Yeah.
Because there's no recoil, there's no impact, there's no bang. The animal thinks like a wasp stung it or something.
Yeah.
And there's like for me, like with a gun, shooting whatever, duck, deer, turkey, elk, whatever, it's like the takes me out of the moment.
Yeah.
Removes me and I have to come back.
Jolts your body. You
Right.
can't
Whereas
see
with the
anymore.
bow,
Yeah.
it's like you never leave that moment. You're there the whole time from beginning to end. And it's like it's interesting you mentioned the point about the level on your
Sight.
on your sight, your pins at the bottom. There's a level. So we were talking. Matt and I were talking last night, and I was telling him, it's like when you're shooting, like it's all you're thinking about. And it's like another thing, like you have to aim a pin, but at the same time, you have to look at the bottom to make sure that a freaking level is level. And it's just like the focus,
Yeah, there's 3 points, right? So, you've got, and I don't know like bow terminology at all.
Oh,
I'm
we're totally
super new
judging
to
you
it.
right now.
So, I don't know, what is that? Your string peep?
Your peep
Yeah.
sight. Yeah,
Okay.
you look through
So
your peep.
I was close, right? So
Yeah,
you
good
got your
job.
peep sight. I'm just imagining that's what it's called. So you've got your peep, you've got the the optic or the sight itself,
Yep.
which, what do you call
Sight
those?
housing.
Slang?
Your pins.
Or your sight
So
housing?
your sight, and then
Your
your
s-
housing is like the metal, and then your pins are the
Right.
little dots. You know,
It's like you got everything working, so you've got to, for me, it's like, all right, so you're, lining up your sight housing, your peep, your pins, and then your level, and you got to orchestrate all that shit together. And you've got so much that you're focused on, and then you're also, okay, I've got to focus on, what did you call it, your anchor point, and then making sure that the release is smooth.
yeah,
And so everything, so you've got your left hand, your right hand, your release, your anchor point, your everything is going on, versus like in a rifle sometimes, hey man, I'm going to put my aim point on there, and as long as that trigger squeeze is solid, and I've got a like stable shooting platform, like I'm rocking and rolling.
I don't have
I'm gonna
to
rip
be
through
exact.
this
I
thing.
can be close.
Yeah, I'm going to rip through this thing.
Yeah.
And no, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm really happy that I'm really happy. Like Rogan, I listen to his podcast all the time. Like
He follows me on Instagram. I don't know if you
no
know that.
big deal.
I like to throw that out there.
Yeah. Like there's
I
like
think
some,
about it.
About
and these
it.
guys are cool, man. It gives you something else to talk about. Like,
Yeah, totally.
like besides just
Thanks for the bows, by the
yeah,
way.
thank
Baker.
you.
That was a nice Christmas
That's what this
present.
is all about. I just realized it. That's what this is all about. Baker wanted to get
Giant
us on a
public thank
podcast
you.
just so we could thank him for
Yeah.
something.
Not
That
publicly
actually makes
shame
me
him.
very, very uncomfortable. I don't like any form of praise. I can't stand it. I hate it. I'm good at bragging about my friends and like building up my friends. I don't like anyone talking about it. It's like,
You are a good hype man. I like that about
Yeah.
you.
You're
Well, it's like,
very
it's
good.
funny.
hype
You're
man.
like Joe Rogan follows me on Instagram. How many fucking people on this planet have been like, motherfucker, Matt Best just like my post? Or they're sitting around going, oh, Matt Best follows me on Instagram.
I don't. I only follow my very close friends.
I think I'm on there. But please.
No.
What? So for all the stuff you guys got going on like social media platforms, can you
Yeah.
put that out there so people can look more into these projects and get see what everything you got going on?
Yeah, man. So I Brad S. Christian on Instagram and Facebook and everything else.
Yeah. Shannon Vandivier. So ShannonVandivier. That's how you can follow me. But, really it's I got to say something. So going back to the bow, I think that was what was most interesting for me about Bobby's story. Because there was something really fascinating about the idea that the bow was healing to him.
Right.
And so I don't know, for me, it was perhaps the idea that the bow is, I don't know, I think I heard a stat once that it takes, like 123 different muscle groups to, pull back, concentrate, release a bow. Pulling a trigger is like 7 different muscle groups. And so, I don't know, just commenting back on our previous conversation, I think Bobby's story is a really fascinating one because it really shows us that whether it's bow hunting or whether it's guiding or rafting down a river or no matter what it is, it's really just about removing yourself from the trap of your own mind and really forcing you into a present moment, kind of situation. Mm-hmm. And so that was...
Yeah, sometimes forcing yourself to be uncomfortable creates comfortability. So, I mean, in my mind, so...
Where everyone listening, where can they watch the film?
It's on, you can just Google Place of Peace and it'll pull up. It's also on the Sitka website.
Place of
sitkagear.com.
Peace.
Yep. Place of Peace. Yeah. And for me, I'll say we live in such a, high pressure society now. Business is moving faster than ever. Everything's digital, instant, go. And, for me, this story, it just shows the importance and I think the value in like just slowing the hell down and that connection that like the wilderness can provide, whether you hike, whether you just taking that time alone to just go be, I know for me, like if I leave my cell phone at home, I'm like, oh crap, I feel like I should turn around. You just feel naked, from just the go, from being so connected and which that's, I love innovation, technology. I'm a huge, proponent of that stuff, but just, again, the place of peace, it's just to be alone, whether it's bow hunting or, like you said, floating down some river somewhere, that just being connected to the natural world, I think, is just, it's a healing thing.
Well, it's awesome you guys took the time to tell like an awesome story about that and highlight someone that's obviously been through a crap ton of stuff. I think society needs to watch a lot more of that and have a good understanding that there's dudes that have not only been on a couple deployments but spent decades and years of their life sacrificing. And even though a lot of those injuries aren't always you can't see them, but I mean they impact you just as much. So. Because, I mean, you know, you didn't once talk about really being shot and how that's impacting probably his bodily movement and functionality on a day-to-day basis. It's more of what's in his mind and how to clear that first. Yeah. So I think that's a really important message in that whole thing, too. So good job.
Yeah. You shot 3 times and blown up, you know, once. And like I told you, I didn't have a super, you know, deep connection to the military going into this. And when I was sitting there interviewing him, it was pretty humbling. I remember sitting there feeling like I was thinking about my 2 daughters and how I sacrificed for them, and they're 6 and 8, right? So whether it's paying the mortgage, whether it's you know putting them in clothes, and they don't appreciate me fully because they're 6 and 8 and they don't have a clue what I go through to provide for them, right? And as Bobby is talking to me, I just remember sitting there in a chair like this across from him, just feeling like this little child as he's because I'm asking him. He's telling me. He doesn't want to tell me, but because I'm coming, like my daughters don't know because they don't come, hey, Dad, tell me about what time did you have to wake up? And I just, it was just extremely humbling to sit there and just feel like such a baby in front of that kind of sacrifice. It just.
Yeah, but, don't don't sell yourself short just because you didn't
I'm not selling myself.
No, but don't think just because you didn't go and do those things that
for sure.
You haven't had your own positive impacts, and no trial lasts forever. And it's like you think about like middle school kids. They go through their first breakup and they're heartbroken
for sure.
And at the end of the day, you look back and you laugh. You're like, oh, this is ridiculous. But then you're like, that's like the most traumatic thing they've ever been through.
Yeah.
And just different people go through different things differently. Yeah.
It's all relative.
All right, well, I'm about ready to fucking eat this package of trail mix, and Dave is going to kill me if I open it on the mic. So thanks a lot, guys, for stopping in.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it, guys.